Hello everyone, and as always, welcome back to my channel. Or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Marlene and I talk about eating disorder recovery and everything related to healing the relationship with your own body, with food, and with movement. And today I want to talk about a topic that I see coming up in so many of my sessions with clients, but also in a lot of the messages that I'm getting online. And that is, what if recovery doesn't go fast enough? What if I am not making big enough steps? But also, what if I've been in recovery and I made the steps and I changed my habits, but mentally nothing really changes? So we're going to talk about all those different scenarios. And I want to start with the question, what if I'm not making big enough steps? One of the big fears behind that, and I'm seeing that over and over again, is that people are afraid if I'm, for instance, not increasing my food fast enough, if I am not eating enough right away, I'm just going to damage something. And for a lot of people, there's also a fear of, oh, I'm not going to heal my metabolism, which then is connected to the fear of gaining, quote unquote, too much weight, or, just this wish of a faster metabolism in the beginning of recovery rarely comes from a place of, I really just want to have a healthy body. And it oftentimes comes from a place of, well, a faster metabolism means that I can eat more without gaining weight. So oftentimes there can still be some disordered thoughts in itself and in the wish of making bigger steps. But of course, that's not always the case. A lot of people are also afraid to be caught up in quasi recovery for too long. So for those of you who don't know what quasi recovery is, quasi recovery basically means that you are making changes, that you're not as rigid as you were in your eating disorder, or that you maybe even change some of the eating disorder behaviors already, but you're still not really eating the amount of food that your body is really asking for, or you're still making up for food, or you're still engaging in some behaviors but not all of them, but you're kind of lying to yourself and telling yourself you're already doing so much better. And oftentimes people on the outside also assume that you're already doing so much better. Sometimes people, for instance, gain weight already and people assume that they're already doing better when they still are very caught up in very disordered, either still behaviors or also in a disordered mindset. And I fully understand that fear, and I think it comes from a good place. It is important that you are aware of that and that you don't want to be stuck in quasi recovery. And again, the wish behind it is a healthy wish. I think that's a good thing to have. But it's also important to understand that sometimes we have to go step by step, and sometimes we have to make smaller steps. And that doesn't mean that you will just stay the same, that you don't make steps. But sometimes recovery feels like taking one step forward and two back, and then taking two steps forward and only one back. And so it kind of feels like you're stuck, but there is still movement. And unfortunately, that is how recovery oftentimes goes. Recovery is not just linear. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have seen those graphics where it says recovery goes like this, but overall the graph goes up basically. But it will come with ups and downs, and you will take steps and then you will step back. And that's okay as long as you don't stop moving. Another thing that I see a lot is when people already had recovery attempts in the past and maybe at one point were already further and then they relapsed, and now it seems to be harder to get to that place where they were before in their recovery. And that can be extremely discouraging. I fully understand that. I was at that place in my recovery where I knew, before I made it further and it wasn't that hard, and now I am not even there and it already is harder to get there. And again, I understand that it can be so discouraging, and at the same time, you can't compare two recovery attempts. There is so much to it, and to me as a coach, that is just a sign that there is still more fear behind it, that there are still more factors that we have to take a look at. So I'm just saying all of that to say, taking small steps is not always a bad thing. I know that I'm also talking on my account about going in and just making a hard cut. And for those of you who are doing that and who are watching this now, this isn't that either. Some people just jump in and they just have to cut all the connections, and they are able to do that. This is not more or less valid than the other way. But for those of you who feel like, oh my God, what if I'm taking two small steps? It is important to be honest with yourself. And if you're working with a team or with someone, to really honestly reflect on that. But at the same time, it is still better to make steps than to not. And I always tell my clients, if you compare the two ways, and the one way is to make a huge step and to just cut everything off, but then it gets so overwhelming that you stop completely. And the other way is to go smaller steps that are not as overwhelming. They're still challenging, but not overwhelming enough for you to just stop completely. I would rather have you go the second way, because with this way, at least you're not stopping. The other part that I wanted to talk about today is, what if I changed everything? What if I started eating, for instance? It, of course, depends a lot on the eating disorders too, but for a lot of people, it has to do with either starting to eat more, starting to eat certain foods, starting to work on their behaviors with movement, or for instance, for people who engage in binge restriction cycles, stopping to with a restriction. What if I did all of that? What if I went through all those changes physically, but mentally I feel worse? Mentally, I don't see any changes. I don't see how this could be good for me. Maybe I even regret recovery. And there are a lot of people out there, and I actually felt that same way in my recovery. My body changed a lot in a very short amount of time. I had a lot of overshoot weight. I had a lot of like physical symptoms. I had a lot of people in my surroundings that did not understand it. And it felt like, wow, I did all those things. And in so many podcasts and in so many YouTube videos, I always heard, oh, once you start, it's not going to be that bad. But for me, it did feel that bad. It did feel like recovery was not the right choice, because in my head, nothing had changed. I actually still missed my eating disorder. I still thought that I was better off with it. And what I had to understand is, on the one hand, that it can take so much longer. Like for me, it took so much longer than I thought. It was not just over within a year or so, but also that I had to be willing and open to really work on certain topics. And for me personally, I'm not saying that's the case for everyone. A lot of it had to do with self-worth, allowing myself that I, on the one hand, see that I am likable and lovable no matter what my body looks like, but also that I don't need that eating disorder in order to feel control, in order to feel healthy and all those things. So there were so many things that over the course of a decade in which I had my eating disorder were so ingrained in my brain that I really wasn't even open to unlearn those things. I wasn't even open to work on my self-esteem, because I thought I didn't deserve to have self-esteem, or I thought self-esteem equals arrogance. And that all, like, I needed to get to that point physically, because otherwise, had I just stayed in my eating disorder, I wouldn't even have gotten there. But it was a really painful and humbling experience to, notice that and to go through that and notice, oh, I really have to open up, and I really have to be willing to be nicer to myself and to change the way I talk to myself. And I know it sounds so shallow, because so many people always talk about negative self-talk and how it affects us, but it really does. And it was so hard for me to not do the negative self-talk anymore, because it was just so automatic that, I tried it and then it didn't work. And so I gave up again. And then I engaged again in like the negative self-talk. And then I felt like I can't have access to all of my eating disorder behaviors anymore. And then I was more depressed, and then I gave it another try. And it was a constant back and forth as well. But in the end, what mattered was that I didn't give up on it. And it's not like I always 100% completely love myself, or that I'm never engaging in negative self-talk anymore, but I'm definitely at a way better place than I was before. And I also don't need my eating disorder anymore, not even the thought of it, because after being in recovery for, a several amount of months or even years, I didn't engage in those eating disorder behaviors anymore, but it still felt like I needed it. And that's why I was kind of like thinking back and thinking about my skinnier body, and still like feeling like I should go back, but I can't anymore. So now I know, whenever the negative self-talk comes up, whenever my insecurities come up, or stress, or whatever it is, now I know very well that I don't need that eating disorder anymore. But it was definitely a process that took years for me. And for a lot of people, it goes faster. But for me, certain things were just sitting so deeply for so many reasons. And so it took longer. But also, had I understood that opening up to certain things earlier would have, sped up the process, maybe I would have been there faster. So let me know in the comments if this resonated with you, what you think, if you maybe find yourself, being one or the other, or if there's something that you don't resonate with at all, as always, please let me know which other topics you want me to cover. I always like to make lists and like add all the topics that you guys want me to talk about. So please text me that in the comments as well, and I will see you in the next one.